If anyone had told me a year ago that I'd be sneaking around, cheating on my husband of 10 years, I'd have laughed in their face. Yet, here I am, living a double life that's spiraling out of control faster than a car on black ice. It all started at a charity gala. The kind where you wear a dress that costs more than a month's mortgage and pretend to care about whatever cause you're supporting. That's where I met him, Alex. He was charming, witty, and everything my mundane marriage wasn't. He gave me a taste of excitement I hadn't realized I was starving for. Our affair was like a thrilling novel I couldn't put down. We'd meet in secret, stealing moments that were ours alone. It was an escape, a fantasy. But fantasies don't last forever, and neither do secrets. Alex's demands started small, a few more nights together, more daring public outings. But then, he dropped the bombshell. He wanted me to leave my husband, Mark. I was taken aback. Leave Mark? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. For all the monotony, he was my stability, my home. I told Alex that what we had was just a fling, nothing more. But Alex didn't take that well. He felt I was playing him, leading him on. So, he cooked up a plan, one that reeked of desperation and revenge. He started going to the same gym as Mark, striking up a friendship under the guise of wanting new workout buddies. I could see his twisted logic. Get close to Mark, and I'd be forced to make a decision. I remember the day Mark came home, talking about his new gym buddy, Alex. My heart nearly stopped. I had to play it cool, act like the name meant nothing. But inside, I was screaming. This game of Alex's was dangerous, and I knew it was only a matter of time before our worlds collided in the worst possible way. Every day became a nerve-wracking dance. I'd watch Mark and Alex interact, my stomach twisted into knots, praying that Alex wouldn't let slip anything about us. But I could see the glint in his eye, the slight smirk when he looked my way. He was enjoying this, the power he had over me. I had to find a way out of this twisted triangle. But with each passing day, the web we'd woven grew tighter, more entangled. I was playing with fire, and it was only a matter of time before everything I cared about went up in flames. In the game of secrets, the truth is a ticking time bomb, and mine was set to detonate at any moment. It was a typical Tuesday evening, the kind where normalcy is a thin veil over the chaos of lies. I was in the kitchen, lost in thought, when Alex, my lover turned my husband's gym buddy, walked in. He wore a casual smile, but his eyes held a different story, a dangerous mix of desire and desperation. Hey, he said, as if we were just old friends catching up. I forced a smile, aware of the walls around us that held my life's biggest lie. Alex's visits to our house were becoming more frequent, a strategy in his twisted game to push me to a decision I wasn't ready to make. But tonight, he was different, more bold, more reckless. Maybe it was the way he looked at me or the tone in his voice when he asked, "Is Mark not home yet?" His words were casual, but they dripped with a hidden agenda. Before I could answer, Alex closed the distance between us. His kiss was aggressive, a stark contrast to the covert touches we shared in the shadows of our affair. It was a kiss that screamed possession, a claim he had no right to make. The sound of the front door opening shattered the moment. Mark, my husband of 10 years, the man I had betrayed in pursuit of a fleeting thrill, walked in. His eyes widened, taking in the scene before him, a scene I never imagined he would witness. Alex, what the hell? Mark's voice was more confused than angry, an echo of the denial that had become his shield against the truth. I pushed Alex away, my heart pounding in my chest. It's not what it looks like, I stammered, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Alex, ever the actor, played along. Sorry, man, I tripped, and it just happened. His excuse was as flimsy as the trust I had broken, but Mark nodded, wanting to believe the lie more than the truth that stared him in the face. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Dinner was a quiet affair, with forced conversation and strained smiles. Alex left soon after, throwing me a look that held a warning. This game was far from over. Later that night, as I lay next to Mark, his steady breathing a stark contrast to the turmoil in my mind, I couldn't shake off the guilt. The close call with Alex was a wake-up call, a reminder of the dangerous path I was walking. But even as I made silent promises to end the affair, I couldn't help but wonder about the hints Alex had been dropping to Mark during their gym sessions. Was my husband really in the dark, or was he just clinging to a fading image of the life we once had? Sleep eluded me that night, as I lay tangled in a web of my own making, each thread a lie, a secret, a moment of betrayal. The truth was out there, hovering on the edge of our lives, waiting for the moment to strike and unravel everything. The day my world came crashing down began like any other, with the sun peeking through the curtains and the familiar hum of the city outside. But under the surface, a storm was brewing, one that would sweep away the life I knew. It started with a text message, an anonymous hint that pierced the bubble of my secret affair. "Does your husband know about your little escapades?" The message read. My heart sank. Alex, my lover, had taken his game to a new level, sending these cryptic messages to Mark, my husband. Each message was a ticking time bomb, set to expose the life I had so carefully compartmentalized. Unbeknownst to me, Mark was already 2 steps ahead. The trust we had built over a decade was crumbling, and in his desperation, he resorted to something I never thought him capable of. Hidden cameras. Small, almost imperceptible eyes that watched and recorded my every move. My betrayal, once shrouded in secrecy, was now playing out in high definition on the screens he watched, hidden away in his makeshift surveillance room. The day he confronted me was a blur. I returned home to find him sitting in the living room, his face a mask of betrayal and hurt. The screens around him played my deceit on a loop, a relentless reminder of the double life I had led. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The evidence was irrefutable, yet a part of me wanted to lie, to weave another tale to cover my tracks. But the weight of his gaze, heavy with the pain I had caused, broke down my defenses. "Yes," I admitted, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. The confession was a dam breaking, and the truth poured out in a torrent of tears and apologies. Mark listened, his face unreadable, as I laid bare the affair that had torn our family apart. But understanding or forgiveness was not on the agenda. The hurt in his eyes turned to resolve, a resolve that chilled me to the bone. "I want a divorce," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm filing for full custody of the kids." The words were a final blow, shattering the remnants of our life together. In that moment, I realized the gravity of my actions. My affair was not just a series of clandestine meetings and stolen moments. It was the catalyst that unraveled the fabric of our family. The home we had built, the love we had nurtured, all of it was coming undone because of my selfish desires. As Mark walked away, leaving me alone with the echoes of our life together, I understood the true cost of my betrayal. It wasn't just about losing Mark or the comfort of our marriage. It was about losing my family, the very core of my world. The chapter closed on a life that once was, leaving me to face the consequences of my actions. A house of cards, once so meticulously constructed, lay in ruins around me. And as the sun set on the darkest day of my life, I knew there was no going back. The path ahead was one of reckoning and facing the harsh reality of a future I had never imagined. If someone had told me that my once coveted life would unravel in a spectacle for all to see, I'd have laughed it off as a bad joke. Yet, there I was, the center of a scandal that stripped me of everything I once held dear. The affair that I thought was my secret escape had burst into the open, splashed across social media and whispered about in every corner of my previously welcoming community. The day it all became public, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from friends, or rather, people I once called friends, filled my screen, each message a mix of shock, judgment, and the underlying tone of betrayal. I watched, as if from outside my body, how quickly my social standing crumbled like a house of cards in a storm. Then came the most unexpected twist. Alex, the man who had ignited this chaos, chose this tumultuous moment to declare his love. He came to my now lonely house, his eyes shining with a victory that made my stomach churn. "Marry me," he said, as if the words were the cure to the disaster he'd helped create. His proposal felt like a slap in the face. How could he think I would turn to him, the architect of my downfall? In a moment of clarity amongst the madness, I realized I still loved my husband, despite the chasm my actions had created between us. I refused Alex, firmly, hoping it would close this painful chapter. But rejection only fueled Alex's anger. He turned vindictive, unleashing a new wave of torment. Pictures, messages, and videos, our private moments, now weapons in his hands, were sent to my family, friends, and, worst of all, my workplace. The embarrassment was suffocating, each new revelation a dagger twisting in my already wounded soul. The final blow came from my job. My boss, a woman I'd respected and admired, called me into her office. The look on her face said it all before she even spoke. "I'm sorry, but we have to let you go. The scandal. It's too much for the company." Just like that, my career, something I had worked tirelessly for, vanished into thin air. I left the office that day feeling like a pariah. The vibrant city streets I once loved now felt cold and judging. Every glance seemed accusatory, every whisper felt like a condemnation. I was no longer just a woman who had made a mistake. I was the subject of gossip, a cautionary tale of morality gone awry. As I walked the familiar path home, now a path of shame and regret, the full weight of my actions hit me. The affair, a misguided quest for excitement, had cost me everything. My friends, my reputation, my career, and most painfully, the love and trust of my family, all gone in the wake of my recklessness. Sitting alone in the echoing emptiness of the house I once shared with my husband and children, I pondered the ruins of my life. The silence was deafening, a stark reminder of the isolation my betrayal had earned me. The crown of social standing I had once worn with pride was now a crown of thorns, each thorn a piercing reminder of a choice poorly made, a trust broken, a life shattered. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Each wooden pew, each solemn face, echoed the gravity of what was about to unfold. This wasn't just a divorce proceeding. It was the final unraveling of a life I had once held dear. As I sat there, awaiting my turn to speak, the weight of my choices bore down on me like a physical force. When Mark, my soon-to-be ex-husband, took the stand, his pain was palpable. With every piece of evidence he presented, photos, messages, videos, the life we had built together crumbled a little more. The judge's gavel sounded like thunder in the tense silence, each strike a nail in the coffin of our marriage. The verdict was a blow, albeit expected. Limited visitation rights to my children, that was the price of my indiscretion. A few, brief hours each week to be a mother, a role I had once cherished and taken for granted. As the gavel fell with a final, resounding thud, sealing the fate of my broken family, a part of me shattered. The strain on my relationship with my children was immediate and heart-wrenching. Their eyes, once bright and full of love when they looked at me, were now clouded with confusion and hurt. Our interactions were stilted, filled with awkward silences and forced conversations. The mother they knew and loved was replaced by a stranger, a woman they visited out of obligation rather than desire. Mark's decision to move out of our family home with the children was the next crushing blow. I remember standing in the driveway, watching the moving truck pull away, taking pieces of my heart with it. The house that once echoed with laughter and love now stood silent, a mausoleum of memories and broken dreams. Alone in the house, I wandered through the rooms, each one a stark reminder of what I had lost. The living room, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays. The kitchen, where I had cooked meals for a family that no longer existed. The children's rooms, now empty and lifeless. The walls seemed to close in on me, the silence a deafening roar in my ears. Nights were the hardest. The emptiness was suffocating, the loneliness a constant companion. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events that led to this moment. The affair, a decision made in a moment of weakness, had set off a chain reaction that destroyed everything I held dear. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of my new life settled in. A life devoid of the laughter of my children, the warmth of my husband's embrace, the comfort of a family. The once lively house was now a tomb, each room a grave for the life I once had. I realized then that the consequences of my actions were not just mine to bear. My children, innocent bystanders in this tragedy, were also paying the price. The guilt was overwhelming, a constant ache in my heart that refused to subside. In the silence of the empty house, I was left to confront the truth of my actions. The affair, once a thrilling escape, was now the source of my greatest regret. The cost of my fleeting happiness was the destruction of my family, a price too high for any moment of pleasure. As I sat amidst the ruins of my life, I understood the painful truth: some mistakes are irreparable, their consequences echoing long after the moment has passed. There's a moment in every downward spiral where you hit the bottom so hard, you can almost hear the shatter of your life breaking apart. For me, that moment came when I, in a fit of loneliness and desperation, dialed Alex's number, the man who had been both my lover and the architect of my downfall. The phone rang, each tone a hammer to my fragile heart. When he finally answered, his words were like ice. "You're too much trouble," he said, and with those 4 words, the last thread of my misguided hope was severed. The rejection was a harsh slap of reality. I found solace at the bottom of a bottle, each sip a temporary escape from the overwhelming sense of betrayal and loss. My days and nights blurred into a continuous loop of drinking and self-pity. The house, once a symbol of familial warmth, now felt like a prison of my own making, its walls echoing with the ghosts of my past happiness. It was during one of these alcohol-fueled evenings that my phone rang with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, yet it carried a weight that sobered me up instantly. "I'm Alex's wife," she said, her voice a mix of anger and sorrow. My mind reeled. His wife? The revelation was a gut punch, another deception in a saga that seemed to have no end. She told me a story that twisted the knife even further. Alex had planned to blackmail me from the beginning. The affair, the friendship with my husband, the photographs, it was all a setup, a game where I was nothing but a pawn. The knowledge that I had been used so callingly, not just by Alex but by my own foolishness, left me reeling. The aftermath of this revelation was like living in a nightmare. My financial situation, already strained by the divorce and legal fees, spiraled out of control. Bills piled up, unopened and ominous. The once secure life I had known was crumbling under the weight of my decisions. The final blow came when I received the foreclosure notice. The house, the home where I had raised my children, where I had lived the best and worst moments of my life, was slipping through my fingers. The move to a small, run-down apartment felt like crossing into a different world. The space was cramped, the walls thin, and the sounds of the city unrelenting. Gone were the spacious rooms and quiet comfort of my former home. Here, in this modest, dingy space, I was confronted with the stark reality of my new life. In the confines of that apartment, surrounded by boxes of a past life and the echoes of my mistakes, the full extent of my fall from grace hit me. I had traded my family, my home, and my dignity for a fleeting affair that left me with nothing but regret and a bitter taste of betrayal. Each day was a struggle, a battle against the remorse that threatened to consume me. The loneliness was suffocating, a constant reminder of the love and life I had so carelessly thrown away. As I lay awake at night, listening to the sounds of the city, I couldn't help but reflect on the choices that had led me to this point. The affair, once a secret thrill, now felt like a poison that had seeped into every aspect of my life, leaving destruction in its wake. The day I heard that Mark had remarried was like being submerged in ice-cold water. The news came through the grapevine, whispered with a mix of pity and disdain. He had found someone new, a woman described as kind and loving, a stark contrast to the wreck I had become. The knowledge that another woman was taking my place, not just in Mark's life but in my children's, was a pill too bitter to swallow. Despite the chasm my actions had created, I tried to bridge the gap with my children. I reached out, my heart in my throat, longing for a connection, for forgiveness. But their rejection was swift and unequivocal. The pain in their voices was clear. I was no longer the mother they knew, but a stranger who had broken their trust and their home. Around the same time, news came that Alex, the catalyst of my downfall, had moved to another city. His departure felt like the closing of a chapter, a final act in the tragedy that had become my life. He had achieved his revenge, leaving me to wallow in the aftermath of the storm he had helped create. Alone, with no one to turn to, the consequences of my actions loomed over me like a dark cloud. My days were filled with a suffocating loneliness, my nights haunted by the ghosts of my past choices. It was during these bleak moments that I started receiving the messages, texts and calls from unknown numbers, each one more threatening than the last. My already fragile world was now tinged with fear. I reported the threats to the police, clinging to the hope of finding some semblance of security. But hope, it seemed, was a luxury I could no longer afford. The police found no evidence, no leads to follow. I was alone, unprotected, the architect of my own demise. The stress of it all, the loneliness, the fear, the guilt, began to take a toll on my health. My body, once strong and vibrant, now felt like a fragile shell. I struggled to find the energy to face each day, my spirit as broken as my body. Then came the night when it all became too much. I remember feeling dizzy, the room spinning around me as I tried to stand. The floor rushed up to meet me, and then there was darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils, the beeping of machines creating a discordant symphony. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the reality of my situation hit me. This was the culmination of a series of choices, each one leading me further down the path of self-destruction. I had lost my husband, my children, my home, and now, my health was failing. In the solitude of the hospital room, with nothing but the steady beep of the heart monitor for company, I reflected on the journey that had led me here. Each decision, each mistake, was a step away from the life I had cherished, a step towards the abyss into which I had fallen. The hospital became a temporary refuge, a place to escape the threats and the loneliness. But it was also a stark reminder of the price I had paid for my indiscretions. Lying in that bed, surrounded by the sterile walls of the hospital, I realized the full extent of what I had lost. I had gambled with my life, and now, I was paying the ultimate price. Lying in that hospital bed, the world outside seemed distant, like a story I was no longer a part of. It was here, amidst the sterile white walls, that fate played its cruelest card yet. The mysterious woman who had called me, the voice behind the revelation of Alex's betrayal, was here, in the same hospital. Our paths crossed like two comets destined to collide in shared misery. We met in a small garden at the heart of the hospital, a place where the sick and broken could find a semblance of peace. She was a reflection of my own despair, her eyes holding stories of betrayal just like mine. As we talked, the pieces of the puzzle that was Alex began to fall into place. She, too, had been deceived, her heart trampled by the same man who had shattered mine. The extent of his manipulation, his deceit, was like a labyrinth with no exit. I listened. Each word she spoke a confirmation of the monstrous web Alex had woven around us. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing I wasn't special, just another pawn in his twisted game. Our conversation was a mirror, reflecting the pain we had both endured, the trust we had both misplaced. Leaving the hospital felt like stepping out of a sanctuary into a storm. The real world awaited, unforgiving and relentless. I tried to piece my life back together, but the fabric of it had been torn too severely. Without support, without the anchor of family or friends, every attempt to rebuild felt like grasping at straws in a gale. In my attempt to find closure, I saw them, Mark, my ex-husband, and our children, with their new life, a life where laughter and love had returned. They were a picture of happiness, a stark contrast to the shadow I had become. The sight was a dagger to my already bleeding heart, intensifying the loneliness that had become my constant companion. Driven by a need for closure, for some semblance of justice, I decided to confront Alex in his new city. It was a journey fueled by a mixture of anger, hurt, and a desperate need for answers. But the confrontation was nothing like I had imagined. Alex was a closed book, his face void of any recognition of the pain he had caused. His words were sharp, cutting through any hope I had of remorse or apology. He dismissed me, a discarded plaything that no longer amused him. Returning to my solitary existence, I felt more broken than before. The confrontation had not brought the closure I sought. Instead, it left me with a deeper understanding of the futility of my quest. The realization that I was alone, truly alone, in dealing with the aftermath of my choices, was a chasm too vast to cross. As I sat in the small, cramped space that was now my home, the full extent of my loss dawned on me. The damage I had caused was irreversible, a scar on the landscape of my life and the lives of those I loved. The affair, once a secret thrill, was now the source of my greatest pain, a reminder of everything I had thrown away. In the silence of my solitude, I understood that the journey ahead was one I had to walk alone. The consequences of my actions were mine to bear, a constant reminder of the price of betrayal. The story of my life, once full of promise and love, had ended in a way I never imagined, not with a bang, but with a whimper, echoing the haunting truth of the choices